So in the last video, we talked about workspaces and plans in Airtable. We also got to learn how understanding the workspaces and how they operate in Airtable is key to understanding pricing plans within Airtable. We also learned that pricing plans within Airtable are workspace specific and not account specific. Today, we're going to talk about something that's very important, which involves giving access and controlling the amount of data that your team members or clients or stakeholders get to see within your workspaces or your bases. Now let's paint a scenario. You've built out your workspace, you've built out your bases, and then you've granted access to your team members, your clients, and then your stakeholders. But one day you wake up and you find out that one of the bases that contains very vital information is missing, or a workspace within your account has been deleted, or suddenly client A has access to client B, or your stakeholder is able to edit certain tables in your workspace. Now, that is definitely not the type of chaos that you would want within your operations as a business owner, right? So let's talk about permission. In Airtable, you're given 3 layers of permissions. We have permissions on the workspace level or layer, we have permissions on the base level or layer, and then we have permissions on the interface levels or layer. Now we're going to break each and every one of them down to the barest minimum, and we're going to talk about the type of permissions you can grant at each levels or layers, and the amount of power or the amount of data that each of these levels of permissions give to whoever it is that it is granted. So let's get right into it. So the first one we're going to look into is the workspace layer. As you can see on my screen, the workspace layer grants 5 levels of rather 5 permission levels. We have the first one, which is the owner. We have the second one, which is the creator. We have the third one, which is the editor. We have the fourth one, which is the commenter, and then the fifth one, which is the read only. So let's see how this works. So workspace permissions control who can access the workspaces itself, right? Itself rather. So now, like I said earlier, the workspace level, or the workspace level of permissions are divided into 5, right? And we're going to see how that works. So now when I intend to share access, or rather when I intend to grant someone or invite someone to my workspace, I will do that using the share button, right? I can either invite the person via email or via invite links. We'll talk about that in the next video. But for now, let's just look at the different levels of access or permissions that we have on the workspace level. So now, if I decide to invite myself to this particular workspace, right? And then Airtable definitely automatically pulls up the different levels of permissions that I can grant. Now, on the workspace levels, these 5 come in an order, with the owner being the highest level of permission, right? So now the owner means you own this space. So basically, when you open an Airtable account, you automatically get the owner level of permission. But you can also decide to transfer the ownership to someone else, right? So a scenario could be when a client who automatically doesn't know so much about Airtable and gives you access to create the account and then build it out. Now when you're done, you hand over the ownership to the client. Now that's for the owner level of permission. Now the owner can basically turn the account upside down. They can delete, they can add workspaces, bases, and stuff like that. So now you shouldn't give someone who you don't want making important decisions within your workspace the owner permission, right? Now that would cause a lot of chaos. Now the second is the creator. Now a creator can fully configure and edit bases. Now their power is just within the bases, right? They can edit it, they can add, they can delete, but they cannot delete workspaces. It's only the owner that has such power. Now the third man on the list is the editor. Now an editor's access is basically within the bases, right? So they can add, edit, and delete records and views also, but they cannot delete your bases, they cannot configure your bases, and they also do not have the permission, or rather do not even have the power to do anything within the workspace level, right? So most of their power is within the bases, and even within the bases, it's limited. Now the third person, or rather the fourth person on the seat, is the commenter. Now a commenter can only view, right? They can view the different tables in your bases. They can see what's going on, but they can't edit it. They can only leave comments, right, within the bases and the interfaces. Now the fifth one is the read only. So what does the read only do? The read only just enables the person to see what is going on within the tables, right? They don't have the power to edit or delete or add or create. They don't have such power. So now that is for the workspace levels, right? So now understanding how these permissions operate, it is key to understanding the fact that workspace permissions apply to all the bases. So when you give someone permission at this level, they're able to see data in all the bases as long as it is within a particular workspace, or rather within a particular workspace where you have given them permissions, right? So their permissions is not limited to just one base because you're giving it to them at the workspace level. They are open to seeing data in the various bases that you have within the particular workspace, right? Depending on the permissions they have, they can edit any of the bases within the workspace if they have such permission, or they can see data within the various bases in your workspace if the permission you're giving them is to comment or to read only. So now that brings us to the second one. Now the second layer of permission which Airtable gives you is the base permissions. So now if I go into this particular base named Pamela, right, I can grant permissions from this base. The base permissions are more granular. Now it's more streamlined, right? And unlike the workspaces, the base permissions have just 4 levels of permission that you can give at the base level. Now this level allows you override permissions given at the workspace level. Let's paint a scenario. Now, if I get into my workspace and I decide to share permissions from here, or if I decide to check who has been given permission at the workspace level, if I am the account owner, I can decide to change the person's permission, right? As long as I have owner access. Only if I have owner access can I change the permissions. But I can streamline the permissions over here in the bases. So if someone has a creator permission in the workspace, I can come here and decide that I don't want that person to have creator access anymore. So I can basically just return that person's permissions the back to whatever level that I want it to be. So basically, I can override permissions given at the workspace level. Now, at the base, like I said, we have just 4 levels of permissions, which you can give your team members at the base level. Now, the first one is the creator access, right? So the creator access, like I said, the person is able to fully configure the base, including the automations and the interfaces. Now, when I give permission to someone just within the base, the person does not have access to go outside of the base where I have given the permission. That is only if I have given the person access from the base level, right? But at the workspace level, the person can do anything regardless of whatever permission I have given the person inside the base, right? So now the creator just allows them to configure the base or to include automations and interfaces. Now the second one, which is the editor, it allows them edit, add or delete records and views, but they cannot configure the base or the interfaces attached to this base. Now the fourth one is the commenter. They can only view and leave comments in this particular base and the interfaces attached to it. And then the fourth one is the read only. They can only view the records and they can't do anything else within the base permission. Now, remember I said at the beginning that base permissions are granular, right? So it makes it, more specific based on the permission levels you intend to, or rather more specific based on the particular base where you have given them access. So one of the scenarios where this plays out is when you have sensitive data. So if someone has workspace level access and you don't want them to be able to edit, in as much as them giving editor access at the workspace level, now you can decide to limit the amount of access they have within that specific base. And this also applies to bases in development where you don't want anybody to tamper with what you have going on, or maybe external collaborators that you just want them to have limited access to the data. So these are different scenarios where you can activate the base level permission. So now let's get right to the third one, which is the interface permissions. Now, the first thing you should know about interfaces is that they are custom portals that you can build on top of the data you have within your tables. So interfaces are not standalones. They are data, or rather they are table dependent, or they are base dependent. So they use the data that you have within your tables to be able to build out whatever custom dashboard that you have decided to build out in your interfaces, right? So now there are custom views, and you're able to specify the type of data and functionality you want within them. Now, one of the most powerful features that an interface offers is that you can give someone access to an interface without giving them access to the underlying base. Now, for example, if I have a table called cleaner schedule management, right? Now, when I give access on the interface level, I am able to hide certain amount of information that I don't want anybody I have given access to see. But now this is not possible within the workspace or within the database levels, right? Because in the workspace, they are able to see everything, even that which I don't want them to see. Now, the only way I can decide to streamline it is by going into the specific base to reduce the amount of power they have based on the permission levels. But in the interface, it gives very powerful exclusivity. You're able to exclude information you do not want people to see, and that is for the interface level. Now, unlike the others, the interface level has just 3 permission levels. So if I decide to give myself access or invite myself as a collaborator on this interface, now I have only 3 permission levels. Now one is the creator, sorry, 4, not 3. One is the creator, which I can fully configure the base. It also happens the same way. The creator level happens across workspaces and bases too. Then I can edit it. I can give editor access rather. I can give commenter access, and I can also give read only access. Face permissions. Now you can grant it, or rather when you use them is when you want to grant clients access to portals, when you want your executives or your stakeholders to have to view the executive dashboards within your interfaces, right? You want to create team specific views, right? So probably for the financial team, you want to be able to show them the loss, the profit, and then stuff like that. Or maybe you want to create forms, because in Airtable, forms are also part of your interfaces, right? That's for the interface level. And these are the 3 layers of permissions that Airtable gives you access to in their ecosystem. There are certain tips that are necessary when you're considering sharing permissions within Airtable. One would be the principle of less privileges, right? Now, I named it the principle of less privileges because your this helps you determine the type of access you should give. So at the end of the day, if you feel someone requires the read-only access, then you should not go about giving them the editor access or the commenter access. You should just be able to read, right? So always understand the permissions that you intend to give and give them as it is, and not try to overshare information by giving them extra power in your workspace. Now, the second one would be use interfaces for external sharing. So when you have your clients or your stakeholders and you don't want them to see what is going on in your database, then your interface is your best bet, right? Because you can hide information away from them. Now, you can also give them access. Now, if you can also, on the team member level, you can also decide which fields are to be editable within the interfaces which you have provided to them. So for external sharing, interfaces are your best bet, and it's also very security conscious, and your data can be hidden away. Now the next one is to audit your permissions regularly. Now this is very important. You should always do an audit of the permissions you have, right? So you could do it quarterly, you could do it every 6 months. It depends on how long you intend to leave it or to let it run for before you can edit or you can audit the permission levels that you have given. Now the next one would be to use separate workspaces. So let's take, for example, you don't want to use your interfaces, right? Now you can create separate workspaces, because remember, at the workspace level, when you give people access at that level, they have access to everything within your workspace. Even if they cannot edit or delete or create, they still have access. They can view the data. So one thing you can do is you can create separate workspaces to ensure that when you give someone workspace permission, or rather You invite someone to your workspace A, they are unable to see what you have in workspace B. Now the next one would be to educate your team, and this is very crucial, and this is something that I always tell fellow freelancers, or something that I always make very clear to my clients, or make known to my clients. Educating your team members on the levels of permissions they have, and then the power that they have with these levels of permission granted is key, because any little abuse of this power or these permissions that you have given could lead to extra charge. It could also lead to loss of information on your end as the business owner, right? Because inviting someone to your workspace without your permission will lead to charges. So imagine a team member invites someone, and then probably this person doesn't understand how this works and goes ahead to invite someone. Airtable is going to charge you for that seat, right? And it will require writing to support to be able to work on that and then have the charges removed, which might not always be an available option, right? So always ensure that you educate your team members on the various permission levels. Now the next one would be, if you're working with stakeholders, it's always advisable to give them read-only access, so they're just able to see and not be able to tamper or make changes. Now if you intend to give them access to say what they feel about it, you can also give them commenter access. And then the last one would be, always test your permission levels. So when you give someone access, right, it is always necessary. It's an extra step, an extra requirement that you should partake in. So to ensure that the data that they see is what they know, what you want them to see, and it's not more than that. Now that you know how to share access or to share permission levels, or now you know the permission levels that Airtable has to offer, we're going to talk about how to actually share this access. So like I spoke earlier, we have two ways, which is via links or inviting them by email. Now we're going to talk about this in details in the next video. My name is Pamela, and I am a low-code, no-code expert and a workflow automation specialist. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.